real name is Draco Malfoy. Yeah, we call him Jane.
Hey.
We're going, the podcast is going, the podcast is going, the podcast is going. It's a bomb. It's a bomb. We're going to drop a bomb. We're going to drop a bomb.
It's
ticking.
It's 23, 26. Oh, there's a ticking right now. Josh Peck, how many seconds left? Put on your goggles.
Put on your goggles, Josh, and make sure to press that button or not.
We're going to send Megan and iCarly straight to hell. Here we go.
There we go. Great intro.
Thank
you, everyone. This is Cinema Lounge, our next episode of Cinema Lounge. It's our show that we do. It's the official podcast of The Great Scub Do, the YouTube channel that I've begun to really do a lot of touching to.
Oh, whoa. Look at you.
I know.
You've been uploading a bunch of things, apparently. So everyone go smash that subscribe button.
By the time you hear this, the first 15 episodes of show that we ever made will be on the YouTube channel.
Whoa.
Which is pretty cool. So that's just pre-current Ben. That's all old Ben.
At this point, it's for people who go back and are like, I want to see if these guys are legit. They want to see if they've actually been doing all this stuff, uploading for all the time. For those real hardcore fans that want to start from the beginning.
It's not a good idea. I always tell people to start at episode 17 because that's when you came on, and I feel like that's when the show really found its identity.
I
Nothing
always tell
against
people
Ben
just
Weber.
Go find something they're interested in and just start from the latest. Honestly, I don't know.
Yeah, I made sure to put like that when a box shows up to press the subscribe button or choose a video at the end of the video. That it always comes to like most recent post.
Nice.
Because I don't want it to be like most relevant, and then it accidentally takes you to our episode on Fight Club where me and Ben actually got in a bit of an argument.
Really?
Wow. Yeah, it was interesting.
Huh.
I listened back to that recently, and I'm still kind of torn on it because I'm like, is he missing the point of the movie, or is he agreeing with me in a very roundabout way?
You were worried that that Ben was misleading people. You were like, I fundamentally disagree with him on this movie. That doesn't usually happen to you and me. Is that happen to you and Ben more often?
Yeah, I feel like me and Weber are more different than you and I in just being in general, which is not a bad thing. Like, it can create some different kind of more interesting discussions, but I feel like the more introspective kind of discussions that we're able to have, because we do connect on those levels, are what I'm more interested in than the conflict side of things.
Whoa. You and I connect on an atomic level. Dude. Hopefully there's no neutron to split us apart and cause a horrible chain reaction.
And destroy the entire atmosphere of the world. Welcome everyone to this episode of Cinema Lounge, the show where we talk about movies that we think are great, or if it's a new thing that came out and we don't know if it's great, we talk about it. This is a presents. We're presenting to you today Oppenheimer, directed by Christopher Nolan and written by Christopher Nolan, based on the book American Prometheus by Kai Bird and Martin Sherwin, score by Ludwig Göransson, cinematography by Hoyt van Hoytema, great name, who also did Nope, Tenet, Ad Astra, Dunkirk, Spectre, Interstellar, and Her. All visually stunning movies. Say what you will about the movies themselves. Ad Astra is kind of a long, boring nothing. Her is interesting, but all gorgeous films. Performances, primarily Cillian Murphy, Robert Downey Jr., Emily Blunt, Matt Damon, but there's also just a cavalcade of people in this movie, such as, Rami Malek shows up for a half a second, and then ends up being very important later on. Josh Peck is in like a quarter of a scene. Jack Quaid is in there and sure loves his bongos. Who else?
Gary
Oldman? Gary Oldman?
Yeah.
Yeah, Kenneth Branagh's in there. Gary Oldman plays Truman, which, I remember I was watching the movie and I thought, man, that guy looks a lot like Gary Oldman in The Darkest Hour. And then somebody later was like, It was weird when Gary Oldman showed up, and I was like, it was him?
Dude, he makes every movie he's in better, and just imagine how bad this movie would be without him.
Dude, terrible.
Probably.
He's the only reason this movie is any good.
Oh gosh, but yes, lots of little weird little. Casey Affleck shows up for a hot second.
Yeah, and he's very good.
Oh gosh, yeah, a bunch of little, almost cameos.
Yeah.
John F. Kennedy makes an appearance.
Sort of. What a weird, beautiful, strange thing to have in there.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of people in this movie. I wanted to call out the editor too. But Ben, while I'm looking for the editor, can you just tell me, like, what is this movie?
Well, what is this movie?
What is
potentially let's take potentially the most important moment of the 20th century, the creation and detonation of the first atomic bomb, and take the man who largely organized the creation of said atomic bomb for the United States, Robert Oppenheimer. And it's kind of a biopic. I guess it is a biopic. Yeah, that's what I would call it. I don't know what else you would call it. Biography, drama. So anyway, yeah, it's the story of Oppenheimer, his life, even more so than just the bomb.
Yeah, it's really not about the bomb kind of at all. Like, to the point where we're like, they don't talk extensively about how they built the bomb. They don't talk extensively about the war itself. They don't talk extensively about the testing of the bomb. It's 98% like Oppenheimer and his journey through the morality of doing this, more so than the technicality of making it.
I was going to say, it's truly the story of, like, humanity through this one man. Like, and in a sense, the bomb or atomic energy as well. Like, this kind of paradox, which is the word I could not think of in the last episode. This paradox of how can something have so much potential to destroy and yet also have the potential to create. The bomb destroying lives, destroying humanity, destroying the world as we know it, and yet also creating the potential for, well, creating a new future, but also creating energy, creating a new age, entering into an atomic age, you know? So it's really like that paradox in this guy's life. Like, how do you both, how do you hold that within humanity?
What's the kind of double, I don't know, like, it's so, I mean, we're getting ahead of ourselves getting into the philosophical aspects of this, but it's like, I don't know, it's interesting. I started reading the book a little bit. I haven't gotten I wanted to read more of it before we did this, but I'm like 45 minutes in maybe, and it's mostly been talking about his parents, which is something that was interesting to me because this is a biopic, but it's a very, like, it's not really about, it's a weird in-between. Because biopics are typically one of two things. They're either about a very specific event or cradle to grave is the term. Where it's like Johnny Cash is born and he's a young boy and his father doesn't love him very much and everything, and his other brother or whatever, like all that stuff. Or the Dewey Cox thing, wrong kid died, like all of that. Right. And then all the way to Johnny Cash today does this and this and this, and he got off the pills, and like, or there is a like there's like a Beach Boys documentary biopic that is about Brian Wilson, that is specifically about two periods in his life, and that is when they were making Pet Sounds, and I think it's Pet Sounds, and when he's kind of like past that prime and not really doing the music anymore. And this is somewhere in between that, because it doesn't follow that specific event, because it's a chronicling a lot of things. If I had to choose one of these, it would be more of like the Love and Mercy route, which is that Brian Wilson movie.
If anything,
where like,
yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, where like it's, you watch the trailer and you think that it's about building the bomb, and you think that it's about the creation of all of that stuff and the implications of that, but really it is a much smaller story that all of that is context for. And the smaller story is this slight between two men and the relationship that is going on between these two men, largely from afar. Like, there's not a lot of actual interaction between Oppenheimer and Downey's character Strauss. But it's really the story of these two guys, and the rest of the movie just serves to get to the point of effectively telling that story.
Yeah. I think it's a very unique way of telling the story. Even like you were saying, like you maybe think that it's going to be mostly Oppenheimer and Manhattan Project, the detonation of the first atomic bomb, all that kind of stuff, or like you were saying, a linear biopic. Start in the beginning, we get conflict in this person's life, and then resolution of said conflict in some way. But I don't think this is a spoiler. I think most people going to the movie have heard this from somebody else. It's told in a fairly non-linear way. I guess not linear at all. It's jumping all over the place,
which is very confusing at the beginning.
But it is kind of confusing, but it works so well. I guess that's up for debate. I think it works really well. I think it's really effective at telling this story with a lot of complex science, math background, complex politics, all this stuff. And I think they do a really good job of explaining it as they go. Not in a linear timeline, which is mind-blowing to me, that you're picking up important bits and pieces of what quantum physics is, or you're picking up bits and pieces of, there's something going on with communists, or there's something going on with President Truman. All these different pieces, providing the viewer with enough information to understand what's going on, I think is really crazy. I also watched a documentary before seeing this. It's a really good documentary. I think anybody who has not seen Oppenheimer yet should watch this first. I think it's even posted. The full thing might be on YouTube. It's called To End All War: Oppenheimer, the Atomic Bomb, and it's from NBC. And anyway, it's like a traditional documentary, linear, telling this person's life story, and very clearly Oppenheimer is the center of that story in the documentary. Really awesome, really helpful. In fact, it even goes more into the atomic bomb than Oppenheimer does in some ways, which is interesting. Sure. So go see that. Or if you don't have an hour and a half to watch a documentary, if you know the YouTube channel Veritasium, have you heard of that?
No.
He does he has 14 million subscribers. He does a bunch of science explainer videos. Anyway, he has a YouTube video that came out 2 weeks ago called Why Oppenheimer Deserves His Own Movie, and it's pretty much a 30-minute documentary.
I've seen the thumbnail for that. I've seen that pop up in my suggested 100 times.
It's really, really, really good, and it because of his background as a YouTuber, he gets more into the science of it all and explains how atomic bombs work and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, those two things, obviously very linear documentary style telling of this story, similar to reading the book that you were reading, the what's it called?
American Prometheus.
Thank you. Anyway, to take all those core components out of a biography or take it out of a documentary and to put it into this kind of storytelling, it's really unique, and I think it really works.
Yeah, that isn't. Yeah, I mean, I think that it works really well for the most part, except that because essentially. The framing device, you don't quite understand what's happening at first, where you know that it's going between time frames, but you don't know what is this weird meeting that's happening and why are they is he on trial, what's going on there?
Especially if you don't know in the background that he was if you don't have the context that he was had communist leanings and that people were trying to put him on blast for that, or if you don't understand some of the ways that he spoke out against the atomic bomb later on in his life, if you don't have that background knowledge, which if you watch these documentaries you'd have that, it's a little confusing. You're right.
Well, I would be curious to see what people who did know that stuff going in would have thought, because I think that Nolan is probably catering to that to a certain degree on purpose. He's trying to create this sense of intrigue of what is going on here, and I would like to know what's going on here. And essentially what is going on there is that he's going under a not a trial, but just a hearing, essentially, to see if he can get his security clearance renewed. but he's just getting grilled over all of this stuff.
And in a
it
way,
becomes
that is,
apparent
like
pretty
you were
quickly
saying
that
earlier, that's kind of the through line of the whole movie. That's the background
Yes.
context. Like the increasing intensity throughout the movie until the very end is this being grilled for the security clearance, slash like maybe getting an award, like being awarded for his work too. That's kind of in the background as well.
Yeah.
So it's like that's the tension going throughout the one connecting piece through all of it. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like there's not really a primary timeline.
Mm-hmm.
It all kind of, if I had to choose one, kind of bizarrely, it would probably be Strauss and him at his hearing for confirmation to the cabinet. Like that would be the one where it's like, this is what's happening. And then we get his storytelling, which is all the black and white stuff. That's Strauss's perspective. And then all of the color stuff is the movie itself being like, and here's the reality of the situation, which is a weird kind of meta story, but also kind of interesting that like that is, we're getting Strauss in the movie telling us this is what happened, and then the filmmaker is coming in and being like, this guy's wrong, here's actually the reality of the situation.
Yeah.
It's like in that way I think the structure is really interesting, but I also would be curious to see like a recut that was fully linear. I know people have done that with Memento, but I feel like Memento, you kind of just turn it into a very dull movie that way. Whereas this, I feel like it would still be interesting because then it would just turn into like.
Here's what I think.
That
I
beginning
think
to
the
end.
story is so fascinating on its own. I almost, there's parts of me that like the documentary from NBC better. I mean, it tells the story and still has, for a documentary, a lot of emotion. There's so much emotion in this man's life story. Whether it's making a big decision that you maybe the wrong decision and the rest of your life feeling guilty about it, or being shaken by this thing that you've done, but carrying the weight of your decision, carrying the weight of what you've done the rest of your life. I think that is such an emotional story outside of anyway. So I think the story in and of itself is emotional, and then maybe trying to justify that the rest of your life, fighting against this thing that you did that changed the world, and then being blasted by people as you're fighting for that and not taking you seriously. Anyway, all of that. I think if you told it in a linear way, it would still be a great story. So it's almost as though I feel like Christopher Nolan's like, oh, let's take a biopic and Nolan it a little bit.
Yeah.
Do you think
this is the thing that I do?
Yeah. Do you think that gets in the way of the story?
I don't know, because I mean, if it was actually about the history and about the bomb, then I think that it would make more sense for it to just be a linear story.
Sure.
But because it's about Oppenheimer and it's about his journey through that, it creates a more interesting narrative to have it go back and forth, I think, because you are like slowly unraveling some of these things where you see him act a certain way in one scene, and then you'll get a reflash of that same thing, and you see more of that, and you come back to that, and there's things that you hear within the story that are like, in a weird way, like premonitions that Oppenheimer is having. But then we as the audience are kind of clued into that. Like, we know what this thing is, or like there's that pounding noise that comes back constantly anytime he's got this sense of anxiety and fear. And eventually you find out what that is. And it's this really cool device where like it's almost as though he has been foreseeing this outcome in the back of his mind this entire time.
Yeah.
And it's something that he's been dreading. And then it becomes reality, which is fascinating and mildly confusing. And I couldn't understand how he would possibly put this whole thing together. And I don't know. I partially want to give a lot of credit to the editor, and I partially want to crucify the editor, because it feels like there's so much in this that I feel like wouldn't work without an incredible edit, which was done by I wrote it down, Jennifer Lame, unfortunate name, who also cut Tenet, also for Nolan, Marriage Story, Hereditary, Manchester by the Sea, so on and so forth.
Yeah.
And my problem with the editing, if we're gonna let's get into some technical aspects here.
Sure.
My problem with the editing is it feels like what I was saying earlier about how like the movie isn't really about the bomb or about the history. It's about Oppenheimer and Strauss and the relationship here, or the lack thereof. And it feels like the first third of the movie is just trying to get so much information across in order to get you to the point of impact in those like later scenes and everything.
Well, it's also like
in a way that it's just like
on who that's the biopic heavy part of it. Like
yes, this happened and this happened and this happened and this is when he met his wife and this is when they broke up and this is when he met his other wife and this is the overlap between those two things and this is his brother and this is him in Princeton and this is him at Berkeley and this is when he met this guy and this is when he met this guy.
Yeah,
and
Einstein.
It's like slow down. And even within the editing of just single scenes, it's like the reverse shot is so jarring at times, where it's like the dialogue is very fast. It's almost Tarantino-esque in how like fast and clever it is, or more Sorkin-y, not Tarantino.
Yeah,
and the doing a reverse shot with that is so like. It drove me nuts at times watching it go from back and forth, which might have been intentional, especially in the scenes where it's Jason Clarke just grilling Oppenheimer or whoever on the panel in his little hearing. But it just felt so weird to me, especially like as opposed to a guy like a Tarantino or a Spielberg, who are able to assemble these things all in one scene and have it flow so naturally. It just felt so mechanical to me. It felt like we have to get all this information across, and this is the way that we do that. Okay, go.
Yeah.
And it didn't feel artful to me, but it also could be intentional and jarring on purpose because it's supposed to be jarring to Oppenheimer. But if it's getting to the point where I'm actually bothered by it, and not just in a way that the movie is trying to portray that feels like a distraction to me.
Yeah. I think to counter your point, I think how I interpreted that storytelling was here's young Oppenheimer juxtaposed with old, weary Oppenheimer. Like here's Oppenheimer before the weight of the world was put on his shoulders. Here's Oppenheimer afterwards. And I think the acting and makeup, it wouldn't have worked without that. I think the way that they were able to both make him look older, hair-wise, hair and makeup, the aging, and like you said, it snaps back and forth so fast that I think that really does ease that. If it was bad, it wouldn't have worked. But then also Cillian Murphy,
amazing.
When he's an old man, I think he's an old man. His voice sounds different. The way he talks sounds like, like in real life when you go back and hear the audio recording of somebody in their 20s and now they're in their 70s, like the way your vocal cords change, you can tell. And so I think without using any of the, to my knowledge, I think it was all practical. I don't think there's any de-aging.
I would be surprised based on Nolan's just vendetta.
But like practically to be able to do that, I think that was something I was really admiring. And just to play a man at different points in his life, but not as a progression, not as I'm young for the first 20 minutes of the movie, then I'm a little older for the next 20 minutes, and I'm not easing into that character in that way. I think it was really well done from an acting perspective. Although I know I get what you're saying in terms of it being jarring and just a different style. Which I could see that actually just mostly being confusing for people.
I want to watch it again though. Like I almost did go and see it again before this. I just didn't have time. This episode is a chronicle of me wanting to do more research and running out of time. If we're talking about performances, I love Cillian Murphy, and I always adore him, and I think he's one of the best actors working today. He's amazing. I've watched all of Peaky Blinders, and he's fantastic as Tommy Shelby. It's a career-defining performance. There's a few other movies that I really want to see from him, like Where the Wheat Shakes the Barley, which I think is done by an Irish filmmaker, but he's so good. 28 Days Later, also fantastic. Who I did not expect greatness from. Like, I love Cillian, but I expect incredible performance from Cillian. What I was not expecting was Robert Downey Jr. And the just complete perfection of, like, I've seen multiple people say, like, Downey remembered how to act in this movie. Like, I have not seen him disappear into a character like this since Chaplin. Like, I love Iron Man and I love Tony Stark, but it's just him. It's just Downey. And that's why it works so well. He's not acting. It's not like watching him in Chaplin, where he has to play this very reserved, kind of quiet British guy. It's the same thing here, where he's just like, Strauss is nothing like Downey.
I don't know what you're talking about. I really appreciated how he totally became Sherlock Holmes in 2009. So
okay, that's a different case. That's a different case.
I'm just kidding.
I do love him as Sherlock Holmes.
Tongue in cheek, totally different.
I love those movies though, and I really hope that they are actually making another one. I don't think
it's the pinnacle of his acting. So
no, that would probably be Dr. Dolittle. But
which in a weird way is pretty much just Sherlock Holmes.
It is. My favorite part of Sherlock Holmes is at the end of every Sherlock Holmes book, when they have the famous parlor scene, right, where they pull everyone in and he explains everything. Yep. My favorite part is when he's like, "And you did it," and then he pulls the bagpipes out of the anus of the squid, just like in or is it a dragon? Just like in Dr. Dolittle.
Yep. I love that.
I haven't seen the movie.
I love the crossover universe between those two.
It's very good.
But
he just like, he fully disappears into this role. Yeah. And it got all the way to the end of the movie where he's kind of giving his big speech and his big moment, where I kind of did step back and was like, oh wow, like that's Downey. That's Robert Downey Jr. And he's really good. Like this very petty, arrogant man who's just so obsessed with his own advancement and everything is like, he's not despicable at first, but when you get the full range of his actions, you hate this guy. And he's played to perfection. And that's like, everyone in this movie is fantastic. But the two leads are just like ridiculously good.
Yeah. Also, no one steps on anybody's toes. It just feels like a team effort at times. Like, everyone's playing their part, and they're not begging to be the star necessarily. Or if anything, they're all stepping back and letting Cillian Murphy just rock it. His chance in the spotlight.
Which is really what you have to do in a movie like this, where like Christopher Nolan has gotten to a point where he's gotten to like Wes Anderson levels of, everyone is in this movie, people, and I have my guys who are in every single one. And there was no Tom Hardy in this. There was no DiCaprio in this, which I would have loved to see Tom Hardy and Cillian, because they're great in Peaky Blinders together. Peaky Blinders is probably my favorite Tom Hardy role.
I still have not watched any of it, and like, especially recently, I've had so many people tell me that I need to check it out.
You would love it, and you would love Tom Brady. Tom Hardy.
Hello, 80 for Brady.
Tom Brady is really good in Peaky Blinders. Yeah, everybody in this movie is great. The cinematography is very good. I wish that I saw it in IMAX, but I feel like a lot of this movie, you don't really need to.
I saw a fun fact about IMAX in this movie.
I also saw a fun fact about IMAX in this movie.
About the black and white shots?
No, you say yours and then I'll say mine.
My fun fact was that for the black and white sections of the movie to be shot in the same quality and be able to show it in IMAX, Kodak developed the first ever black and white film stock for IMAX for this movie. How neat is that?
It's crazy. Yeah. I think that there has been like stuff shot technically in IMAX framing before, but I don't think it's ever been like literally actually like the way that they did it here. Wow. So this is like, it's a very cool, and it looks great. It looks fantastic.
Anyway, your turn for a fun fact.
My fun fact is that IMAX film is massive and ridiculous, and the reels for this movie are... I wrote it down. Let me get this real quick, because I want to get it right. But if you've seen the videos, I'll put some... If I have video here, I'll put the videos up of like Chris Nolan showing off how do you do IMAX, and here's the cameras for IMAX. And it's just insane. Like, these things are massive. You wouldn't realize how big they are. So the IMAX film for this movie, the entire reel is 11 miles long.
Whoa!
And it would take 3 hours to walk the distance of the film reel. So you could walk Oppenheimer
Wow.
at the same pace that you could watch Oppenheimer.
That's so crazy. That is a very fun fact.
Isn't that weird?
That is very fun. Wow.
It's nuts.
Not with how I walk. I'm a speedy speed walker.
So you'd be really
Heel
fast.
toe, squeeze the glutes. That's my motto.
I'll show you glutes. What other notes do I have here? What are the technical aspects? We're talking about cinematography.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. You told me earlier in the week that you didn't know if you liked the score. You thought sometimes it got in the way of some really great scenes. Do you still feel that way?
Yes, and this is without rewatching it and without having also, again, I didn't re-listen to the score. Like all these things that I wanted to do before doing this episode. I haven't re-listened to it. I like Ludwig Göransson, and I'm sure if I listened to it, I'd be like, oh, that's sweet, that's epic. But so much of it feels like Nolan is just going really intense all the time. And there's not really any moments that really slow down that much. Well,
except for one that they clearly center a lot of the movie and the score around. Are we in spoilers? I'm gonna give a 10-second spoiler. So everyone, close your ears for 10 seconds.
I think that we can safely move into spoilers. Like,
okay,
I
fine.
would say, like,
full on spoilers.
We're 30 minutes in. Like, everybody, go watch the movie. It's worth seeing it. If you can see it in theaters, I would say it's worth seeing it in theaters. It might be too late at this point when it comes out in a couple days.
Fine.
This episode.
No, it's good.
It's worth seeing in theaters if you can. It's very good.
What else are they gonna show? They can keep showing this until the writer's strike is over, probably.
Yeah, that's true. Which I want to do an episode on that. But yeah, everyone go see it. My answer is yes.
Yes, yeah, go see it. Go. Especially if it's just a different take on a biopic. Go check it out.
It is.
Honestly, also don't watch it before or after Barbie. Just enjoy both those films on their own for what they are, and then you have time and space afterwards. I know you did, and I want to hear that experience, but don't do it, guys. Just go and watch Barbie, and then you can talk to your friends about it afterwards. Go and watch Oppenheimer. You talk about it afterwards. Don't try to put the two together, because then you're not going to get the full experience of either of them, and it's not going to work. Just
I got the fullest experience.
Did you like it?
Yeah.
Watching them both together?
Yeah.
You did like
I like
that?
movies. Yeah.
You didn't find yourself the next day like, oh my god, I'm so confused. I can't tell where Ken starts and Oppenheimer begins.
No, it felt the same.
The next day, you weren't telling your friends, like, yeah, Ryan Gosling really killed it as Oppenheimer.
He was really good in that.
Yeah, I know.
He was fantastic in Oppenheimer.
Yeah.
They're remarkably similar films.
Really?
That's a joke.
Okay.
Say we're in spoilers. James Bond, unfortunately, dies in the end of this one, unable to go on missions in the future. The secretary disavowed all knowledge of his existence. The bomb got him. He was bombed, and then he will never do comedy again. What's your spoiler, Ben?
Oh, my spoiler is that we were talking about the score, or perhaps lack thereof, when the first detonation goes off at the Trinity bomb site. It is silent, and for the rest of the movie, having a lot of background noise in all of the scenes, it is definitely.
It's
pretty
different.
It's different to sit there. Yeah, exactly. And
I think Bill said he did a little bit of research,
yes.
and it was the right amount of timing too. Like it was about 40 seconds apparently, which is how long it would have taken the sound waves to reach them. That like how many miles away?
Wow, interesting. I saw that the sound didn't hit them, but almost immediately a blast of heat hit them because heat travels at the speed of light pretty much. So that radiant heat hit them before the sound did. Crazy.
Huh.
Yeah.
That's wild.
Yep. You gotta see the documentary, man.
I will see the documentary if you send it to me.
Okay, get on my Plex server and start
Jerk.
there. Okay, I will. Right after this, I'll share my server with you.
Yeah,
awesome.
I think the other place where the music kind of dropped out that I really loved, that might be my favorite scene in the movie, is when they're in an office with some of the military guys and they're discussing where they're going to drop the bomb. And it's really interesting because something that I didn't know is that the Nazis had surrendered already.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that until
Correct.
I watched this.
Hitler was dead.
Yeah, I had no idea.
Which is also very interesting because such a driving force for the creation of the atomic bomb was
Yes.
the race with the Nazis. So suddenly it's like, oh, hey, okay, well they're done, but we've been working on this. We kind of need we want to see what it can do at the same time as, most Americans, most people in the world are over the war. Nearly everybody knows somebody who has died because of this. And Japan is, has now been marched back to their home island chain. And anyway, but the Nazis were out of the picture by that point. Yeah, Russia had captured Berlin.
Which is crazy. That adds so much more moral gray area there. And you even see a lot of the scientists at Los Alamos are like, should we do this? We did, what's the classic, you were so occupied thinking if you could that you didn't think about if you should. They almost say that verbatim in the movie, where Oppie walks in and sees all of them having this meeting and kind of gives his rationalization of this is why we're doing this and this is why it still has to happen and this is the deal. And they're all like, I don't know, man. And then that leads into that meeting where they're discussing where they're going to drop the bomb, and it's in very cold terms, and it's kind of terrifying how if you were these guys, you would certainly get desensitized to all this at a certain point. And looking at the options that they were looking at, it's an impossible choice to make. You're choosing between, your two primary choices are drop the bomb somewhere. They don't want to put it on a culturally significant area. They didn't want to put it on a area that was all civilian. That was kind of the tough thing, though, is that the Japanese had put a lot of their manufacturing for war factories and planes and stuff like that intermingled with civilian areas and stuff, so there wasn't really a primarily military target that would have made sense, and there's all these considerations there. Or your other primary option is full-scale land invasion of Japan, knowing that based on all of our intel, they were not going to surrender, that would be the only thing that would actually stop the war, is that kind of invasion, which would have killed how many Japanese as well as Americans, and then the death count is it's an impossible choice. But if the military men are in charge, it's a pretty clear guess which one is going to happen. And hearing the kind of cold terms in which they're discussing, well, which one? We got this one and this one. What do you think about this place? They're choosing a place to go eat lunch. It's just, it's disturbing. But I at the same time, I can't imagine being in that position. I don't, I don't envy it at all.
Yeah.
But there was no music. So you're dialed in, and you're listening to what these guys are saying.
In both of those moments, two of the biggest moments of the 1900s, the moment the first atomic bomb is detonated in testing, that is a moment that the entire world changes.
Yes.
Everything about how the world works. This thing has never happened before. We've never split an atom. That's the first time that's ever happened, and the music cuts out. And then also now we're taking this thing and we are making the conscious decision to kill people with it, and the world changes again. It's weighty.
It is
fascinating.
It's also interesting to me that you don't ever see any war. There's no war, not even in news footage, of there's our boys out in the field doing, don't forget your gun, Johnny. There's nothing even remotely like that. There is a scene, however, where it is immediately after the bomb drops, Oppenheimer's having all kinds of regret and moral quandaries just pounding in his head. And there's a scene where they're showing slides of the destruction and the effects on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And they don't show it. But what they do show is Oppenheimer's face. And you see his reaction to this stuff. And I'm kind of conflicted about it because, like, the movie's about Oppenheimer, so what we want to see is his reaction. And it's an artistic choice to specifically focus on him. But it also feels weird to minimize it almost by not showing it. Because it was, like, horrific. Like, people's eyes were burned out of their heads and they were turned to crisps, and the people who lived were walking around like zombies with, like, partially melted skin. Like, it's horrifying stuff. And it feels like, I don't know, like, I would be interested to hear Nolan talk about why they went that direction of not showing it at all and not showing the effects at all, and just having to, like, trust Oppenheimer that, like, yeah, it was bad, or trust his reactions that it was bad.
Yeah.
Or we get, like, the reactions of the people in the room kind of going like, oh, like that as well. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I don't, like, it almost makes the movie more palatable, like, for the audience not to have to see that. I feel like, yeah, it's, again, like, I think it's just, like, our artistic choice, I suppose. Like, I think it's almost like he wants it to be slightly not the reality, which is so, I don't know, you know what I'm saying? Like, like, you need this, I think he wants this movie to not feel like a documentary, to not feel like a traditional biopic, so then he makes these decisions that, like, a documentary shows the news footage from Japan.
Yeah.
Oppenheimer doesn't, because it's, like, outside of reality in some ways. I don't know how to describe exactly what I'm trying to say. But
no, I get it.
It's just like more artistic choices, I guess. And I don't know if that's right or wrong.
I think it could fit in, though, because I feel like the interesting creative choice here that we have with them not showing any footage of the war or generals or anything except for Groves or Grover?
Leslie Groves, but he went by Dick, apparently, because he didn't like the name Leslie. His middle name was Richard. Leslie Richard Groves or something.
Yeah, not a lot of great options there, huh? Like, we don't really see a lot of military men except for him, and we don't see war footage and stuff, so a lot of this is like they're all sequestered in their little special made-up town, which is their own fantasy land of science and wonder and everything, where they're totally separated from the war, and they're just working on science, and they have nothing to worry about, really, other than making a timeline, maybe.
Yeah, or, like, you know, accidentally making a bomb that blows them all up, I suppose.
Yeah, that also would be a concern, but they're not concerned about the war itself.
Sure.
So, like, they're not thinking about, like, what would the impact be of this thing, because we're not thinking about the real world consequences. We're just thinking about, you know, the science we can do here in science camp. And it could be interesting then to show the aftermath then of, like, we weren't thinking about this. And here's the after effects of us having fun doing science.
Well, that's also the interesting thing with Oppenheimer, was he was so theoretical. Like, he was into the theoretical side of physics. He was, you know, contemporaries of his said that he didn't win a Nobel Prize because he actually kind of sucked at math, and he didn't write long papers, but he had great ideas and was a really good leader. And was into the theory of it all. So it's interesting that you say that, because, like, so much of his strength is the theory and not the practical side.
Yeah, not the reality of it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like we're thinking about the theory. Can you split an atom and make a huge explosion? Yes, theoretically. But then when it becomes reality, not theory, it has different consequences. Yeah.
Which is a weird thing, because there's times when he's, like, too married to theory and, like, well, that's not reality, that's only theory. Where they come into the school at the beginning at Berkeley and he's like, look at this, they just split an atom in Germany. And he's like, that's not possible. And then he's like, I'm gonna go try it. And then him and Josh Hartnett, oh yeah, Josh Hartnett's in this too. they're arguing about it, and then the other guy comes back and he's like, I did it, and he's like, what?
Dude, that's like the real story too.
Isn't that crazy though?
Yeah. The real story is the other guy was sitting in the barbershop chair getting a haircut, reading the paper, and read that they had done it in Germany, and halfway through his haircut stood up and ran to go find Oppenheimer and tell him about it.
That's amazing.
Nuts? Yeah.
Dude, can I tell you a crazy story about Oppenheimer's childhood?
Yeah.
So this is something that I got from the book. It talks a lot about his parents and his childhood and stuff. He was very well-to-do. Like, he was not wanting for money or resources. His mother was a very successful artist, and his father was a very successful businessman. And his father was he was a German Jew who came to America, and they lived in the States. His mother was American, so on and so forth. So they were very much able to support every kind of interest that Oppenheimer had as a child. So there was one point where he got really into geology. And he talked about, interestingly, how he realized later on that he wasn't interested in it because of the minerals and stuff, but because of the crystal makeup. And he was even then thinking about, like, what is this thing made of, and what's the things that this is made of, like, which is cool and fascinating. But the story is, this is the way it goes. And I hope this is all real. Based on the sources of this book, I would guess that it was. But apparently, there was a time when he was so into geology, he was like 12 or 13 years old. And he would write letters to local geologists, like professionals in their field, and like ask questions and talk to them, and created this correspondence. And they invited him to be a member in, not knowing his age, invited him to be a member of, I think it was the New York Geological Society, and invited him to come and do a talk.
Whoa. That's
right?
Crazy.
Yeah. And his parents were like, yeah, do it. He was like, I don't think I can. He's like, no, you have to do this. And they took him and they introduced him and said, this is J. Robert Oppenheimer, and he's going to talk. And they all laughed, and then he went up, and they gave him like a round of applause and everything. Like, he was crazy gifted from the beginning.
That's just, what an interesting human being. Like,
right?
What an interesting case study for humanity. Like, he's just like so smart, but also so awkward, but also like a womanizer, but also like
yes, which is also interesting because his parents never had any kind of strife like that. Huh. From every account in the book, they were like an incredibly strong marriage. So like I'm just fascinated to thinking like where, like, with such a solid, strong example of what that should look like, how is this where he got to, and like why is that such a moral gray area for him?
Being smart. Love,
I guess, I don't know.
It also seems as though, obviously, it seemed as though all of that was more doctored up for the movie compared to like the documentary that I watched. The documentary was just like, yep, he was with this lady, and then he was with this lady, and like it was just like obviously less of the moral dilemma than the movie. But
yeah, it's not as much of a focus of a documentary as it is about a film.
Sure, right. Yeah, that makes sense. What were you left with at the end of this movie, Marshall? I guess what was like your... I think it's a great movie, and I think great movies leave the viewer with potentially multiple ideas afterwards. Like a great movie doesn't force you necessarily into one big takeaway. Like, what were you left with when the credits rolled?
I don't know. I just was trying to think, like, what is the long-standing impact of Oppenheimer and of the atomic bomb and of the atomic age? And is it a net positive or is it a net negative? Like, where do we sit with that? And I really don't know. Like, that's the interesting line that so much of the movie hinges on this conversation that Strauss didn't hear, where he thought that Oppenheimer had said something to turn Einstein against him. Yeah, and it's kind of the reveal by the end of it. Slight, yeah. But then you find out at the end, like, and I don't know how we know. I'll get to that point in the book, and maybe there will be some record of like knowing what that conversation was. But there was this idea that was also fascinating to me, that apparently there was a chance that when they dropped the bomb, it could potentially ignite the atmosphere of the entire planet and destroy
the chain
world.
reaction would just go and go and go and go and go.
Yes, that
and
it wouldn't
everything
stop.
would be gone. Yeah,
Which is crazy.
So there's like that real fear as they're all sitting there. Like imagine like we're about to drop this bomb to test it, and we don't know if this is actually just going to kill everybody on the planet.
Yes.
Isn't that nuts? Yeah.
It's insane. And so that concept comes back, and they're like pretty sure it won't happen. Like it's near zero is kind of the thing, and it comes back as a joke a couple times. And then in that conversation with Einstein, what he says is something to the effect of like, you remember when I brought you that paper that had this thing that said like, if we do this, there's a possibility that the whole world could be destroyed. And he's like, yep, I remember. And then Oppenheimer says something to the effect of like, I'm not entirely sure that is what happened. And obviously talking in the most literal terms, that's not what happened. And like we're living in a world with nuclear power, and which is like the cleanest possible power, assuming that all things go well. Looking at you, Chernobyl. But it's like trying to figure out like what is the lasting impact of that, and like is nuclear armament a deterrent, and is that stopping war, and is that stopping larger scale war, or are we just all holding on to these bombs and waging war anyway? And if we didn't have them, would it be worse, or are these bombs stopping us from going further than we are? Like it's all theoretical. Oppenheimer would love the question. It's all theory. Like I don't really know. It's a really tough thing, and I really don't know where I sit on it. I certainly don't want anyone to use the bombs. Like I would love the idea of not having nuclear apocalypse happen, but is total disarmament a good idea? Is it a realistic idea? Because then, you know, North Korea or somebody is just going to hold on to whatever bomb they may or may not have, and then they'll be the only one with a bomb. And, like, I don't know. There's so many quandaries.
Yeah. Oh, especially as somebody who didn't grow up or didn't live through World War II, or somebody who didn't grow up in the Cold War. Like, yes. I'm somebody who has grown up as a millennial, kind of. Maybe Gen... What is it? What's after millennial? X, Z? Whatever, Z? Somewhere in between those two things, Z. Where it's like, you know, the threat of nuclear war feels like a made-up thing, even though there are literally warheads all over the planet.
Yep.
You know, anyway.
Underneath our state somewhere.
Yeah, right. I was fascinated by that conversation between Oppenheimer and Einstein as well, but for a slightly different reason. He says, like, do you remember when I came... this is Einstein. So do you remember when I came and you threw that party for me pretty much, and you like people gave speeches and all this stuff, and he's like pretty much predicting Oppenheimer's future, like it'll come for you too. And the whole idea of like your legacy is kind of not really your legacy, or maybe that's the point they're making. Like,
well, he says it wasn't for you, it was for them.
It was for them, yeah. So, you know, all the people in Washington, you know, it was for them. And I wonder too how that plays out in my life. Like when I'm 70 years old and my accomplishments are, then they're not even mine anymore. All these people are living, and they're maybe celebrating me. I don't know, maybe that's like the image I have. But really they're not celebrating me. They're doing it for themselves or whatever. What is your legacy? And like, how much do you actually own the things you create once you've put them into the world? Like once we've created Cinema Lounge and put it out into the world, we don't really own it anymore. It's everybody else's, and that's just kind of a sobering thought. And I think that's kind of the whole end of the movie is just like sobering. It's so weird. I didn't feel like especially emotional by the end of the movie. I feel like people had hyped it up to be emotional. I didn't feel emotional, but it felt like, oh dang, the world is a heavy place. Like this is weighty.
Yeah, it was an interesting thing where like. he does. It's kind of the traditional hero's journey thing almost with the Joseph Campbell of like the call, the denial of the call, coming to it and everything. And then he, throughout this journey, is going on all these trials and figuring this out, and literal trials at times, and creates, in doing this, a world in which he can no longer inhabit, where he becomes a relic of this past that they don't need anymore. And not only do they not need anymore, they don't want him anymore. And Strauss does all of this work to discredit him, which for a long time works.
Oh, wow.
And for even now, absolutely worked until this movie came out. Even though Ed Strauss's trial, Rami Malek's character, went up there and totally blackballed Strauss. But the lasting legacy of Oppenheimer, until this movie essentially, for the general public, has been, that's the guy who made the bomb, that's the guy who ruined the world, like that's all of this different stuff like that. And it's interesting looking at that kind of continual pattern in history of like, this guy did this thing, we use him, we get rid of him, and then a decade, 2 decades, because that was like the 60s when he was honored like that. It was like, we're doing this to make ourselves feel better. We're apologizing to you for us. We're not apologizing to you because we actually care. We're doing this because we screwed you over.
Sure.
And you even see like his wife in her response to those surroundings and everything, especially to Benny Safdie is in this movie, director of the Safdie brothers. His response there, or her response to him, like not shaking the hand, is so good.
Dude, that's so funny that you bring all that up too, because in the scene right before Strauss and Oppenheimer have the run-in with Einstein, Oppenheimer turns to Strauss and says something like, Einstein's accomplishments are, he discovered the theory of, or he invented the theory of relativity 20 years ago. Like he's old news. It's done. Which and then that turns out that the word of wisdom that he gives to him is that like you'll get there too, pretty much.
Which is
like,
it's
you'll know
interesting
what this feels like. Yeah.
They even frame him as like he's just some old man out there feeding the ducks. Like they make him look so irrelevant in the terms of the movie, which is so cool because everybody knows Einstein's name.
Yeah.
Not everybody knows Oppenheimer's name, but everyone knows Einstein. So if we're coming into this movie and we're painting this guy as some putz who just walks around and feeds ducks every day, and he's not important anymore to us, then what does that say about Oppenheimer?
Yeah.
What does that say about us and everybody else in this story? If even Albert Einstein, that silly guy who sticks his tongue out on the wall of your high school science classroom, he's irrelevant. Like, that is really subtle but masterful storytelling.
Yeah.
And I love that.
Marshall, does this movie go down as top 5 movies of the 2000s?
Ooh, I mean, I'd have to make a list. Maybe of the 2010s?
Okay. I think I saw...
But it's not the 2010s, it's the 2020s.
I saw critics claiming it. I saw a couple of critics saying this is... I saw a couple people saying top movie, most influential movie of the 21st century.
Okay, well, most influential is absolute nonsense because it came out 2 weeks ago.
Sure.
So what is it? Maybe this influenced this episode of the podcast.
Top movie of the 21st century. Also, we're 23 years into the century, so.
Yeah, I mean, that's a bold claim. I would have to look at a list of like best movies that came out in the last 15, 20 years. Like, it's the best movie that came out in the last month.
Barbie,
I know that.
Barbie shakes its head at you.
Dude, Barbie was good. I liked Barbie. Mission Impossible, also good. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles comes out tomorrow or the day after that.
Yeah.
I'm excited about it.
Yeah,
And
Meg 2.
See that one.
The Trench.
Ooh, the best. That's going to be the movie of the year.
But maybe the 21st century. I don't know.
Probably I mean, I don't know. Maybe of all time.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know, man. It's just good. It is good.
Yeah, I feel like it's like it's not like I got done.
I love it though.
I know that's what I'm sitting on right now. Is that it's not like I don't think it's my favorite movie of all time.
It's certainly not my favorite Nolan.
Yeah. I don't know. It's so unique and so interesting, and I think like within his filmography, it stands out as. I mean, has he done another biopic?
No, I was going to say, this is the first time he's ever done anything like this before.
Yeah, right.
He's done historical drama with Dunkirk, but he's never done a thing specifically about a real person like this.
So, I don't know. It's... I like this movie a lot, but it's also not like... I don't want to like scream to my friends to go see this movie, or like... I don't know how many times I'll rewatch it in my life. Probably a couple.
I don't know.
But I don't know. but it's so good though. I just like
it is. I'm glad that you have this same strange conflicting feeling in you.
Okay.
Where I'm like, I really do like it a lot, but I don't really like it, and I don't know why.
Maybe in 10 years it just like maybe it like stands up to the test of time better, and I look at it differently in 10 years. That'd be an interesting podcast episode. Movies that
Oppenheimer 10 years later.
No, well, when we're still doing this in 10 years. No, movies that when they came out were just fine, and now they've stood the test of time or something. But I think, okay, so if we oftentimes do this on the Letterboxd situation where we're like, I give it 3 stars, but I really like it, so I'll hit the like button. It's almost like I would give this movie 5 stars, but I wouldn't hit the like button. You know what I'm saying? Yeah.
Wow. Like, but I would like it.
Yeah. We'll sit on it, Marshall. We'll have the listeners can chime in what they think. Maybe we'll rewatch it. Maybe the acting is so okay. So like let's go through all of our lists. The acting is really great. I think the directing is good.
It's always good.
I think the score is pretty good. Oh, see, okay, now I'm talking myself into this. Okay, so there is some great stuff, but there's also just some like good stuff. Like it's not all great, I think.
I feel like there's a few scenes in this that really stood out as really, really good.
Yeah.
And the rest was like pretty good Nolan stuff.
Yeah.
Like I really loved the scene in the war room. The Trinity test sequence is amazing. The final scene with Alden Ehrenreich and Downey where he's unveiling all of his evil plans. And then my favorite scene in the movie is probably... It's either that war room or right after the bomb goes off. Mm-hmm. And he goes and he's doing a speech to all of the students. And you see finally what that noise has been. It's them stomping their feet in the auditorium. Mm-hmm. And they're all hooping and hollering and yippee and wahoo and take that, Japan. And you can see his face, and it's very Tommy Shelby. Like you see the conflict and the absolute terror in there that he's trying to mask, of like he's realizing what they've done and the impact of that and what that's going to be, but he's putting on this front of like, I don't know what the Japanese are thinking right now. And then he kind of stops for a while and he goes, but I'm sure they don't like it. And it's like he's saying the party line, like he's saying what they want to hear. And they all cheer like crazy. And then suddenly, the sound design is amazing in this movie. The mixing, not so much. The sound design, fantastic. Suddenly, amongst all this cheering and stomping, all of the sound cuts out, except for the very tail end of a woman's scream. And it's a scream of like, woo! But when you take everything out except for the sounds that are within Killian's self and body and shuffling feet and that one scream, it becomes terrifying. And it's like you're getting this anxiety attack that he's having, and you can see the walls behind him starting to shake, almost like he's had a little bit of that scarecrow toxin left over from 2005. Like it's like that was the same kind of effect that it looked like, where it was like that kind of warbly shaking thing, and the sound design even kind of matched that. And then it starts to get bright, like the bomb is going off, and you see just the vaguest impression of this girl's face being melted off and blown away. And then, like, he's walking out, and all of them are cheering, and it's almost... But you can't see them cheering, you just hear all of this really disturbing sound design, and reframes all of like the cheering and hooping and hollering as really grotesque. And you see the couple making out under the bleachers, and it is weirdly like disgusting in a way. And it's like the way that he's reframed this is fascinating. And he imagines that he's stepping into one of these husks of a person left over, and even as he walks out of the building, you get that horrifying sound design. There was like, I felt like I was watching an episode of Twin Peaks. It was genuinely one of the more disturbing scenes that I've ever seen in a movie. That to me
Marshall,
was so much more impactful than anything else in the movie.
See, you just answered the whole thing about why they didn't show any of the slides of the aftermath of the bombings. It was all right there.
Yeah.
I don't think that would have been as effective if you would have seen the real pictures.
You're right. Because like that's the difference between horror and terror, right? Horror is you see Jason and he shows up with his knife and you're like, oh no. Terror is watching Nope and hearing that sound and thinking, what the hell is that?
Yeah.
And your mind fills in every little bit. And it's so much scarier in your head. Your own mind is so much scarier than anything that the reality could possibly be. And the moment that you see the thing, it's like Alien. Alien is terrifying, and then they show the whole alien for the first time, and you're like, what a weird-looking, big, tall guy. What a silly boy.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I am a genius.
Well, there you have it. Yeah, seriously, we're the best movie watchers ever, honestly.
I am become podcast.
All right. Well, Marshall.
That felt shoehorned into me.
Is this it? I am become death podcast.
I am become podcast. Death of podcast.
So Marshall, yes or no?
Yes.
Yes, me too. Go see it. Go see it in the big screen with the popcorn, as Chris Nolan wants you to.
If this then that.
Yeah. Oh yeah. If this then that.
Hard to compare this to anything.
A Beautiful Mind.
Yeah, I can see that.
Or The Imitation Game. Both biopics.
The Imitation Game feels like it's trying really hard to be A Beautiful Mind in this movie. And it doesn't, like, it's good. Yeah. But it's feel like, I don't know, biopics have just felt so bog standard for so long to me.
Well, hey, this movie maybe broke the mold a little bit for you.
Yep.
Nice. I mean, it got you. I feel like it got a lot of people who maybe are over biopics to go see a biopic. So.
It sure did, but I feel like it's the people weren't really seeing it as that, and also the Barbenheimer mayhem really helped with that. We didn't even talk about the box office. The amount of money that both of these movies made was not a ton individually, but the fact that they both made this much money on the same opening weekend is record-breaking insanity.
Yeah,
like,
I mean, they're both in the at least over $50 million. What did this movie make? $75 million? Is that what?
I think it was 80 at least.
80 at this point, and it's still going.
Yeah.
Like
it's
but
always
also it's like
this versus that, and it's like, are we gonna go see Batman versus Superman, or are we gonna go see Captain America: Civil War? Like the fact that people took this opposing thing and were like, let's just do both of them, is so cool. Yeah. And is not what happened with The Dark Knight and Mamma Mia.
That's right. That's what everyone was comparing it to, wasn't it?
Yeah, Nolan had a bit of a glow up this time.
Well, also, outside of it just being Barbie and Oppenheimer, just two original stories, two new IPs. Yeah, like
great filmmakers, Greta Gerwig and Nolan.
People are tired of the same stuff. Give us new things. I mean, horror movies are back on the menu this summer. Just original stories. I think people will go out and see a movie in theaters if it looks interesting, and these looked interesting and new, and people wanted to go see them. So,
I think there's a really interesting thing happening right now with the writer's strike and the actor's strike, where the industry could collapse. And if it does, it would be a good thing. Yeah. Where it's the same thing that happened in the old days with the studio system when that fell apart, and then you got the 70s. Which is a golden age of film. Incredible stories from incredible fresh filmmakers. And then the 80s became weird and saturated. And then the 90s it was the same kind of thing again, where it was this indie revolution, where it was a lot of modestly budgeted movies from interesting, weird people like Steven Soderbergh doing Sex, Lies, and Videotape, like the weird stuff like that, small things like that created an interesting renaissance there. And then through the 2000s and stuff, we've kind of gotten really generic again. And I think we could be getting to a place where, and this has kind of already been happening, studios are overspending like crazy, movies are not making the amount of money they used to, and studios like Blumhouse are starting to make really modestly budgeted movies that make crazy money. It's the same thing A24 is doing. And I think if this keeps going the way it is and the industry does collapse, like Bob Iger is so scared that it will, I think that could be, bizarrely, a really good thing for movies.
For consumers, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's very fascinating. That's very interesting. I mean, also, yeah, you just... If the industry was already shifting into that direction, you tack on a pandemic and you tack on the strike, yeah, that's a recipe for hopefully change. Fingers crossed.
Beautiful disaster.
Beautiful disaster. Which is exactly
Like the
the same as the next movie, which we'll be watching on the pod, A Beautiful Disaster, Meg 2, The Trench.
Trench the 2.
Get ready, everybody. Or Blue Beetle, the movie that was designed for direct-to-streaming, which is for some reason in theaters.
It's unfortunate. And it's also like, they had talked about it as being the first movie in the new DCU, but now I've heard James Gunn talk about Superman Legacy as the first new movie. So, which makes more sense to me than having it be Blue Beetle. Ben?
Yes.
Imaginary toast.
Yep. I'll hold up my candle that I lit earlier. Here we go.
I'll hold up my candle that is not lit.
Oh, it's lit. One of us is lit. One of us is not.
It's lit.
You figure out who, listener. All right.
All right, Ben.
I go first.
Yeah.
Here's to. Wait, hold on. Let me gather my thoughts for a second. This is a heavy one. This is a heavy toast.
No time.
Okay, no time to compose my thoughts. Here we go. Here's to Cillian Murphy and Matt Damon and Josh Peck, the stars of the show. Here's to big explosions and little explosions and all explosions in between, because every explosion is beautiful. And here is to nuclear energy and the heat death of the planets. Here's to here's to Chris Nolan and his
wrap it up.
Here's to movie theaters, and here's to IMAX and walking and film. Good night.
Here's to the bomb. Here's to your mom. Here's to thank you everyone for the dust of Los Alamos, for the marbles in your bucket, and maybe next time you see the podcast you'll say I like let's watch it.
Oh, that rhymes. Think it and sink it. Not our best toast, but a good episode nonetheless.
Birds. I think my favorite toast is still the ones from Master and Commander episode.
I think I'm a little better at toast when I've had a couple whiskeys, and I am sober.
Well, time to start drinking. Thanks everyone for listening to this episode. Like we said, we're officially putting. I'm looking to look at my camera now. If we have the cameras on this episode, then that's cool. Thank you everyone for listening to this episode. It's a show that we're doing, and we like to do the show. Next week is going to be Barbie. And it's going to be an episode that we do. And after that, we'll see. Maybe Ninja Turtles. I would really like to talk about Ninja Turtles.
Me too.
But also, I want to talk about the writer's strike and the actor's strike at some point. I got a lot of notes on that.
Yeah, we should. We should record a double episode next week and do a presents and talk about the strike.
I'm down. We're going to need to do that because I'm going to be, busy for a little bit here soon. But yeah, thanks everyone for listening. You can check out the description for all the different stuff that we got going on. Discord, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube as well. We're on YouTube. Maybe you're watching this one on YouTube. That's pretty cool. Probably not though, because I don't have time to start posting the next 40 episodes yet, and I'm still exporting, and it takes a long time. So, thanks everyone for listening to the show. Check out the social medias. We love you.
Love you.
We love you, Eric and Megan, and I'm trying to remember Henry. What's the name of the new?
Oh no!
Isaac.
Quick, in the episode. Bye.
I've been Marshall.
I've been.